They used to beat me up. Tried.
Sobs of pain, tears of relief.
I admit that I've been a bully before, and I'm really sorry to all of you guys that I've been a bully.
Hearts softened and souls searched, futures changed.
Over the last 2 years, we've seen over 500 suicides prevented that we know of. We've seen over 7 school shootings prevented that we know of.
For these Arizona students, like millions of others around the country, in fact around the world, life took an unexpected turn when they heard an unexpected story.
Well, my daughter Rachel was the first one to be shot and killed in the Columbine tragedy in 1999.
A story that played out where the Great Plains die and the mighty Rockies begin. It is a story of horror and of hope.
She wrote almost prophetically that she would die before she was 20 years old as a homicide victim, which stunned us. But she also wrote that her hands were going to touch the hearts of millions of people.
It is the story of Rachel Scott and her challenge to create a chain reaction of good that reaches around the world, one heart at a time.
It can change lives. It can change your life. It can change the lives of people around you.
Tonight, the power and the promise of Rachel's challenge.
Good evening, I'm Patty Kirkpatrick. If you're a parent with kids in school, chances are they'll be coming home sometime this year and telling you about Rachel's challenge. And they will almost certainly tell you at the same time just how much they love you. More on that in a moment. But first, you may be wondering just what Rachel's challenge is. And for that, you have to know the story of Rachel Joy Scott.
She was a spark plug in our family. She could light up a room when she walked in.
Darrell Scott says you could tell early his middle child, Rachel, was special.
From the time she was little, she would bring home stray dogs, stray cats. I mean, she was always for the underdog, always standing up for those that were bullied.
Columbine High School principal Frank DeAngelis says she was always ready to help a friend in need or a stranger in need of a smile.
You'd go down the hall and she would pick up the spirits of other people just because of the enthusiasm she would bring to school every day. It was contagious.
It was a lesson her sister Bethany says was learned early in the Scott household.
My parents definitely had an influence in how we treated each other. From a young age, they talked to us and told us the importance of how we treat each other has an effect. So I knew growing up, and Rachel knew growing up, I can make an enemy in my house, I can make a friend in my house.
That's not to say the Scotts were perfect. Rachel's parents divorced when the children were very young. And Rachel's sister Dana remembers that, like all families, they had their fair share of squabbles.
You know, we also fought over the mirror in the bathroom, you know, getting ready for school, and she stole my clothes and makeup a lot, and she stayed up late talking on the phone and to her friends, and I was banging on the wall for her to shut up and go to sleep and stuff like that.
But through it all, there was family.
My parents have always been wonderful parents and role models for us, and I just think that something that we all had in common was that we just treasured family time.
And the 5 Scott children, Bethany, Dana, Rachel, Craig, and Michael, were especially close.
We loved hard, we fought hard, we played hard. We definitely stuck together, and if we were attacked, you attacked all of us.
And that's something Rachel took with her outside the family as well, taking an attack on almost anyone as a personal affront.
She would be the type of young lady that if someone was sitting by themselves down in the cafeteria, she would go up and have lunch with them.
She made friends easily, wanted to be an actress.
My son Craig, we have him on videotape, and he and Rachel were goofing off when they were younger, and he was kind of teasing her.
I am an actress, not. I will be famous.
And she looked at him and she said, "He will be my hairdresser."
But most of all, Rachel had a clear sense of who she was and who she wanted to be.
She was her own person. She was strong and feisty, but all in a good way. And she wasn't a follower.
Rachel was content with who she was, and one of her favorite quotes of mine was one where she said, "Find out who you are and let it stay its true color."
And there was something else about Rachel, something that would play a key role in the events that were about to unfold. She was a prolific writer, filling diaries and journals with her thoughts.
And then we had this gift of diaries given to us that shared so much depth, you know, things that she never knew we'd be reading when we were, and we got to know her ups, her downs, her insecurities, her goals, her strengths.
But on a bright April morning in 1999, neither Rachel nor her family realized how much those writings would mean. And although Rachel had told family and friends she somehow felt she would die young, on that spring morning she had no idea of the horror that was stalking the halls of Columbine High as she sat outside having lunch, writing in her diary for what would be the last time.
If you would have asked me prior to April 20th, 1999, could a Columbine shooting happen at Columbine, I'd say no.
Principal Frank DeAngelis has been at Columbine 33 years, first as a teacher, then as principal.
I mean, this is a perfect community. A lot of parental support, a lot of community support, a well-established community.
But on April 20th, 1999, the blue-lined halls of Columbine would run red with blood.
And my secretary runs in and said, there's been a report of gunfire and bombs exploding. And I said, what are you talking about?
DeAngelis didn't know 2 students, including Rachel Scott, had already been shot, but he did know there was more to come.
As I came out of my office, the gunmen were coming into the building. And so all I remember that day was guns being fired, glass shattering behind me. And I kept thinking to myself, you know, I'm going to die.
Suddenly, the gunmen turned down towards the library, gunning down Coach Dave Sanders as they went.
And Dave probably saved my life because they diverted the attention from me to Dave.
As DeAngelis whisked a group of students to safety from the gym, police began to arrive, and news began to trickle out.
When I came back from lunch and my supervisor told me that there was a shooting at the school.
I was at a shopping mall and my wife called on my cell phone and said that there had been a shooting at the school.
I was home and the TV was on and the news broke that there was a shooting at Columbine.
Rachel's sister Bethany, the closest to Columbine, headed towards the school.
There were helicopters out everywhere, there was already police tape out, there were police cars everywhere, and people were jumping out of their cars and running towards the school, just leaving their cars in the middle of the street.
And I turned on the radio and there was an announcer who was just sobbing, and he said that up to 30 kids had been shot and many of them had been killed. And I almost went into shock. And I started doing the math in my head immediately. I remember that. I thought, 1,800 kids, I have 2 children, my brother has 2 children there. What are the odds?
Meanwhile, Dana was on the phone with her mother.
I was like, have we heard from Rachel and Craig? And she goes, well, we've heard from Craig, but we haven't heard from Rachel. And it was really weird because the moment that she said that, it's like something inside of me just broke.
To this day, Dana can't explain that feeling of dread, knowing only at that point that her parents were still looking for Rachel.
I remember running out when the buses started coming up with students, and they brought them over to the elementary school where we were, and just looking in those windows, hoping to catch a glimpse of Rachel. And I balanced on top of a fence, and remember thinking, maybe she's on the next bus, you know. And when the final student walked off the final bus, that's when I think I really lost hope.
I think the reality, though, of what was happening didn't sink in for me, though, until my brother Craig came home, because when he walked through the door, he had blood on his clothes. We were asking him, what happened, what's going on, and all he kept saying was, it's really bad, you guys.
The Scotts prayed Rachel was injured, hurt, unable to find help. But as the Colorado sun faded, their hearts knew the horror of Columbine had stolen into their home.
By that evening, that first night, we all knew in our hearts that she was gone.
The Scotts were certainly not alone in their anguish. 12 students and a teacher died that day at the hands of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold. It was later learned they had planned to blow up the school with propane tanks. When that didn't work, they used guns, which they ultimately turned on themselves. But if hate was what the gunmen hoped to spread, their plan failed as miserably as their bombs. The Columbine community came together like never before.
We also had just this amazing outpouring of love and support from community and family and people we had never met in our lives, and it just made that whole process so much easier.
An outpouring of love for the families of all 13 victims, their memories marked by crosses in a quiet cemetery east of the high school. Rachel's car, still parked at the school, was buried in flowers. Her casket, like a final yearbook, covered with wishes and with prayers. And through the pain, the Scott family did what they always had done. They found strength in each other.
I just remember a deep sadness. I do remember feeling irritated that birds were singing. I mean, it's the weird things that your emotions do with you. And I thought, you can't be singing, my daughter's gone.
The grief that followed, it wasn't that Rachel died so much that bothered me as much as how she died. My sweet little sister who loved people and life.
In that haze of grief, there was one constant: family.
A lot of hard crying together as a family. My whole family came together and spent hours together, just quietly crying.
And the Scotts found strength not only in each other, but in Rachel, whose spirit, unbeknownst to them, had been spread to countless classmates.
And at her school, at her funeral, we began to hear story after story after story that we would have never heard if she had lived. We were just amazed. We knew she was kind and compassionate, but we didn't know to what degree she had gone to show that at her school.
And there was something else. Darrell Scott remembers a call from a stranger.
He said, I've had a reoccurring dream about your daughter for the last 2 weeks, and it's the same dream over and over. And in the dream, I see her eyes, and there's a trickle of tears falling from her eyes, and the tears are watering something that's growing out of the ground.
It meant nothing to Scott until several weeks later when police returned Rachel's backpack.
And in her backpack was some of her school books. I took them out, and at the bottom was her final diary. So I quickly turned to the last page of her diary, and when I did, I was stunned because I was looking at a picture of her eyes and a trickle of tears, and the tears were watering a rose.
That is what Rachel was drawing in her diary outside Columbine the morning she died. A teacher later told the Scotts she'd asked Rachel about it, and Rachel answered simply,
I'm going to be an impact on the world.
It was one of many inexplicable but almost prophetic events surrounding Rachel's death. How prophetic, the Scotts couldn't have guessed back then, because those tears Rachel had drawn were already watering a seed of hope, even then taking root in the story they decided to share.
We knew the media was at our door, and we decided, what do we want to say? This is our one chance to represent Rachel. And so initially, we just came out and decided that, as a family, we're hurting and this is painful, but we are going to forgive, and we are going to heal, and we are going to find good out of this situation.
What the Scotts did not know was how the story they told would resonate, how Rachel's vision of touching millions of hearts was about to come true. It was a story they just had to share.
I think we all knew that we had something bigger than us to share. It's hard to put your finger on it or to explain it, but when you have a bigger calling than yourself and your own dreams, you feel it, and our family felt it.
When we come back, the birth of a chain reaction, the power and the promise of Rachel's challenge.
I was out here one day, and I was looking at her grave, and it has her birth date, August 5th, 1981, and it has the day she died, April 20th, 1999. And I was looking at the space between those two dates, and I was thinking about the fact that those two dates represent her start and her end here on the planet, but the space represents her life.
And Rachel's dad is always ready to share the story of her life, just as he did with Ruth and Rex Cooper from Arizona, who were visiting the Columbine Memorial while we were there. Rachel would be 30 today if she had not been killed, but her too short life was about to have an impact no one could have imagined.
Just weeks after burying his daughter, after sharing her story with reporters, Darrell Scott was asked to speak before Congress.
I actually told them no, because they wanted me to talk about gun control. I felt like the issue was a lot deeper than gun control, that it had to do with choices young people make, influences in their lives, and I'd already learned enough about Eric and Dylan to know that they had chosen to filter their minds, fill their minds with violence in their music and their games, their movies.
And Darrell knew the power of positive influences as well.
Rachel was influenced by Anne Frank. Rachel's killer, Eric Harris, was influenced by Adolf Hitler.
It was Anne Frank who influenced Rachel to keep her diaries, journals filled with messages not of hate, but of hope.
I won't be labeled as average was something she wrote on the outside of her diary that had bullet holes in it, that was in her backpack the day that she died.
My favorite quote from Rachel was, she said, "God, create in me the church so that wherever I may go, I may find sanctuary."
Don't let your character change color with your environment. Find out who you are and let it stay its true color.
One thing Rachel's taught me from her writings is that it's not what we have, it's not what we do. That doesn't define us. We're not human havings, and we're not human doings. We're human beings.
That very human message delivered before Congress struck a chord.
And when I got back from speaking before that House Judiciary Committee, I had an old answering machine in those days, and it was full at 50 messages of places asking for me to come and speak. The second place I spoke was in Laurel, Mississippi, and it was a rodeo arena. It seated 15,000, and 25,000 people showed up. And we also began to see immediately the power of Rachel's story, that the story of her life was somewhat separate from Columbine's story. It's kind of like Anne Frank's story is separate from the Holocaust, but you can't fully separate the two.
The Scotts thought the interest would fade in a few months, disappear with the next tragedy in the news cycle. Instead, the offers flooded in faster than ever.
It just kept growing and growing and growing to what it is now.
And what it is now, the Scotts never planned. As they saw how Rachel's story touched young lives, they began to develop a school program based on her life.
We don't go in with the attitude of you need to do this and you need to be like Rachel, but we go in with saying, you know, Rachel chose to be this way, and we just tell the story and then let the students take away from it whatever they want.
Rachel's challenge is a simple message of kindness and compassion, that our words can hurt, our words can heal.
The first step, the first challenge, if you will, right from Rachel's own code of ethics.
Like this one down here where she says, look hard enough and you will always find a light.
Students hear how Rachel's brother Craig saw his friend Isaiah Scholes gunned down at Columbine, a racial slur, one of the last things he heard. And they're challenged to see beyond that.
And so we talk about prejudice, and we talk about Rachel in her writing saying, don't judge people by anything outward, but look into their eyes and you may catch a glimpse of their heart.
The intent not to preach, but to teach through Rachel's life.
I love this where she said, I love how you have to be risky to go far. She was specifically talking about like her drama class and how she was willing to take risks in it and put herself out there.
So our second challenge, dream big, write goals, keep a journal. When you look in the mirror, don't see what other people see. See what you can become.
They challenge students to find those positive influences, reminded of the day two very different influences collided at Columbine.
In fact, it's ironic that Anne Frank was a role model in Rachel's life. Hitler was a role model in Eric and Dylan's life. And Anne Frank was killed from the influence of Hitler, and Rachel was too. Our fourth challenge is kind words, little acts of kindness make a huge difference in people's lives.
In all, there are more than 24 challenges, some for elementary school kids, others for high schoolers, some for business groups. But at the core, their message is always the same.
Because Rachel's challenge is to start a chain reaction of kindness and compassion to everyone we meet.
Now Rachel's challenge is taking root in Arizona, and 3TV is so proud to partner with them as they roll out the program in schools here.
All year long, you can find out when they'll be coming to your school or learn how to get your school involved at azfamily.com.
And remember earlier we told you that your children might come home and tell you how much they love you after hearing the Rachel's Challenge presentation? Rachel's dad, Darrell Scott, tells us there's a very good reason for that.
At the end of our first year high school program, that's a challenge that we give to students. We have them close their eyes and think about 5 to 10 people that they love the most. And then we give them an assignment. Go and tell those people. And the reason we do that, and we tell them, sometimes we wait until it's too late. And we wish so desperately. If we could go back with someone we've lost, we would tell them 1,000,000 times in one day, I love you, you mean so much to me.
And while the message is surprisingly simple, it is changing lives.
I know that someone out there's life is going to change when I get up and tell this story.
Just ahead, the power and the promise of Rachel's Challenge in action.
She drew an outline of her hands, and in the center of her hand, she said these hands belong to Rachel Joy Scott and will someday touch millions of people's hearts. She was 13 years old when she wrote that.
Now, almost 13 years after her death, Rachel Scott's hands have indeed touched millions of hearts. It happens every time her father, her sisters, her brothers, or others from Rachel's Challenge tell her story. Pins on a map mark the thousands of schools where the story has been told, each one another link in Rachel's chain reaction of kindness.
And this month, new pins are being added to that map with schools right here in Arizona. And as the Scotts have seen so many times before, Rachel's hands and story are still touching hearts.
Well, in the assembly, they see the first 10 minutes is about what happened at Columbine.
Most of these middle school students are too young to remember Columbine, but the tragedy still touches their hearts.
And we go after the heart of the kids. And believe me, when they give you their heart, you've got their head and you've got their hands.
Presenter Adam Northam says that call to action described by Darrell Scott is what sets this program apart from others.
Most assemblies create a temporary climate change. Our goal is to create a permanent, positive culture change.
Over a hill.
So when Rachel's Challenge comes to a school, there's an assembly where students hear Rachel's story and how she wanted to change the world.
But how do you know that trust, compassion, and beauty will not make this world a better place to be in and this life a better one to live?
But then they break into leadership groups or clubs.
And then the clubs in the afternoon so that the students can start applying these challenges to everyday life.
And it is almost always an emotional journey.
I admit that I've been a bully before, and I'm really sorry to all of you guys that I've been a bully. It just made me get up and apologize to all the people.
While Rachel's Challenge is not specifically a bullying program, many students relate to that most.
That presentation made me rethink everything that I've done or that other people have done to me.
They can identify with feelings of being bullied or being the bully or school safety. Am I safe here?
For some, feelings bottled up for years rush out.
Kids always used to pick on me every day, beat me up, said some words. And it really hurt.
But the idea is to turn those tears into actions. Schools can set up all types of programs, from service projects to anti-bullying campaigns. And just like Rachel seemed to know, it all starts with kind words and simple acts.
It kind of shocked me about how much words can affect a person.
I like it because it gives other kids the chance to express what they're actually feeling.
Any student comes to Liberty Charter School, they could feel welcome here.
Just how the lives of Arizona students will change, no one knows for sure. But the Scott family, the whole Rachel's Challenge team knows that if history is any guide, the future for all of us is about to get a lot brighter.
Over the last 2 years, we've seen over 500 suicides prevented that we know of.
And we get hundreds and hundreds of messages a month from kids that's saying, I was a bully, I'm going to make it right, I'm going to stop, or I was bullied, I'm not getting bullied anymore.
Some of our service projects are mind-boggling. In the Dallas area, we had 4,000 students came together right after the earthquake in Haiti last year and broke the world's record. They packaged over 1 million meals in 7 hours.
Every day they see the chain reaction Rachel dreamed of come to life.
Her overall message isn't news. To most of the world, it's not really profound, but it's powerful. It's just treat other people the way you want to be treated.
Just sharing her life can change the lives of other brothers and sisters, students at school. It really does have an impact on us emotionally. It brings a lot of healing.
And that healing has come for Columbine High School as well, where Principal DeAngelis' office is filled with reminders of each victim, but also where a new library promises hope, and where students strive to find the best in themselves and others.
And that's why Rachel's challenge is so phenomenal, because they go out and they impact lives of students, and they talk to students about caring about others and accepting others.
It's all part of that chain, every link connected.
So we are constantly reinforced that, we are still supposed to be telling this story, and so we do.
The most fulfilling thing in my life is seeing young people's lives changed. And it came out of the worst day of my life. And so when people say to me, I don't see how you can do this, I say, I don't see how I cannot do this. I don't have a choice.
And you know, Darrell Scott would be the first to tell you this isn't just for children, it's for all of us. So when your kids come home and tell you about Rachel's challenge, embrace them, support them, help them spread a chain reaction of kindness, and tell them right now just how much you love them. Good night.
Strive to find the best in themselves and others.
And that's why Rachel's challenge is so phenomenal, because they go out and they impact lives of students, and they talk to students about caring about others and accepting others.
It's all part of that chain, every link connected.
So we are constantly reinforced that, we are still supposed to be telling this story, and so we do.
The most fulfilling thing in my life is seeing young people's lives changed. And it came out of the worst day of my life. And so when people say to me, I don't see how you can do this, I say, I don't see how I cannot do this. I don't have a choice.
And you know, Darrell Scott would be the first to tell you this isn't just for children, it's for all of us. So when your kids come home and tell you about Rachel's challenge, embrace them, support them, help them spread a chain reaction of kindness, and tell them right now just how much you love them. Good night.